I'm going to show you that you only need to do a small amount of workouts to get a huge benefit. And the benefit comes because you have much more strength at every part of the range of motion, and you are very resistant to muscular fatigue due to downhill running. And this is really important in a race that has any kind of downhills. Boston is notorious for having the first 4 miles downhill and then the last 5 miles downhill. And guess what? Most people, if you are watching in the last 5 miles, they are hurting. Their quads are cramping up and all kinds of nonsense going on. Why is that? Even if it didn't happen in training. Well, early on in the race, they went out fast, perhaps, or they're not used to downhill running, and so they run downhill those first 4 miles and they shred their quads, basically. And then it's flat, it's rolling, so they don't notice. And then when they get to the last 5 miles heading towards the finish line and it's slightly downhill, their quads are shredded because they didn't have enough sarcomeres in order to mitigate the impact of running downhill. There are 2 parts of a muscle. There's 2 proteins that slide over each other, and that's what creates a contraction. Now, most of your strength comes in the middle of a range of motion, right in the middle, when there's the maximum amount of overlap. And then when you continue to contract beyond that, like a bicep curl that you did, and now you're almost touching your shoulder, when it goes far like that, you lose some overlap and you have less strength. So if you, instead of having 1 sarcomere in a given space, you had 2, what would happen? As you start to contract, you would have some overlap. And then at maximum overlap, you would still have the 100% possible strength in the middle. And then here's what's really cool is when you get to the end of a range of motion and there's less overlap, well, instead of there being just 1 of these, now that there's 2, you have a higher percentage, almost double of the strength that you could have if you had only 1 sarcomere. So having more sarcomeres in the same space is advantageous. Now, how do you get more sarcomeres? So let's take a look at the Journal of Physiology. Now, here's something that they found is that sarcomere disruption is the starting point in order for getting stronger. So in order to have an adaptation, you need to damage the muscle first through training, and then you'll supercompensate again. And so the keys here are your workouts are eccentric and that they disrupt the sarcomere. So what is an eccentric in running? Well, it's downhill running. You ever notice when you run downhill that you get really sore, and maybe the next day or 2 days later, you're really sore? It's called delayed onset muscle soreness. And the reason that happens is because you disrupted the sarcomere. Additionally, let's say you did a downhill run, maybe a 5 mile or 10 mile downhill run, and you were sore, because you would probably be sore. And then if you did it a week later, you would be less sore. This is the result of adaptation of having more sarcomeres. So that means that you've adapted to downhill running and you're not going to get sore, which means you're not going to lose strength. So here are your keys for adaptation. First is that the most effective stimulus you can possibly give yourself is running downhill. The second most effective is running fast, really fast, like sprinting. Now your injury risk goes up the faster you run, but it also goes up when you run downhill. So your injury risk is about the same here, which is why you absolutely, this is very important, precede any downhill workouts with strength. Downhill running should only come after you've done weeks or months, at least 6 weeks is my recommendation, of strength training. So that means increasing your mileage, regular running, uphill sprints, and maybe some light weights. Light eccentrics can be done throughout the entire phase of training. Now that contradicts what I just said, right? But I'm talking about a hard workout. When I say light eccentrics, I mean running over rolling hills. That's a great way to do a little bit of downhill running that's not too intense, not too fast, kind of often. And then finally, all you need is to do 3 to an absolute maximum of 5 downhill workouts in your entire training session, your entire training cycle, and you're going to have a huge improvement in your training. If your race isn't very hilly, you could even do 1 to 3 of these workouts. But especially if you're going to run Boston or any hilly course, this is imperative. You don't need to do them too much. You do them during your specific phase and possibly at the end of your support phase. The way that I like to do it is get on a treadmill that can go downhill. That way you can run just downhill. You warm up and then you put it at somewhere between 2% and 6%. You don't need to go much more than 6%. And you just run downhill, however long is appropriate for your training. And then the best way that I like to do this is just find a huge hill. Now, if you don't live in the mountains, it's harder. But if you do, you can just get a ride and go, drive out 10 miles up a hill towards a mountain and then run back the entire way. If you can do that, great. Otherwise, a treadmill is a great option, and hill repeats where you're going hard on the downhill is your third option. And I'm going to leave you guys with that. You only need to do a small amount of workouts to get a huge benefit. And the benefit comes because you have much more strength at every part of the range of motion of your leg. And you are very resistant to muscular fatigue due to downhill running. That is critically important in a race that has any kind of downhills. So catch you guys on our next training. Thank you. Hey, if you like that video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And the best way to give back is to take the link for this video and send it to just one of your friends. It really helps us grow. We appreciate it. Thank you. We'll see you on the next video.